Well, look, I think at the moment we've seen this 32nd meeting of Australian and American defence and foreign ministers. So, in many ways, this is the continuation of a very long, stable defence cooperation relationship. But we have seen a bit of a ramping up of rhetoric, particularly given the sort of tension we're also seeing in our environment, a strategic environment at the moment. So it's not unsurprising. Cooperation runs deep between Australia and the US, but we're seeing that deepen even further with this latest meeting.
Do you think it's to send a very strong message that this is a very important region for stability?
Absolutely, and that this is an important relationship. The Australia relationship is really at the centre in some respects of this security dynamic. So I think the signalling is all very positive and very much about where does Australia and where does the US sit in our changing region.
Yeah. Let's talk a little about the AUKUS, the deal that switched Australia to nuclear-powered submarines. Do we have any indication on how soon we'll be getting those submarines and what's going to happen in the interim?
I think that the timeline is a long one there, Beverly, and this deal, the AUKUS Pact, that really has seen the ambition for Australia to acquire nuclear-propelled submarines means that that capability should arrive for Australia in a couple of decades. So I think what we're seeing now is a very serious talk about what do we do with the capability gap in the meantime, and how do we actually develop a plan going forward so that Australia is not left without capability while we wait for those submarines to actually arrive.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, there's a lot more talk about bringing Japan closer into this alliance. How likely is that, and what sort of form would it take?
Well, I think Japan has been cooperating with both the United States and Australia separately and together. Since 2019, Japan's been a part of the Australia-US Talisman Sabre exercises that are conducted off the shores of Queensland. So cooperation again with Japan is not unusual, but I think we've seen a level of commitment to that cooperation in the statement produced by defence ministers after this round of talks. I don't necessarily see Japan being brought in either to an alliance or to the AUKUS Pact anytime soon. We are looking at a relationship that needs to mature much further before anything like that would be considered. But cooperation is on the table, practical cooperation. I think that's a positive sign again for the region.
That is interesting that you don't think, though, that they would come into an AUKUS arrangement, which would potentially signal, will send the wrong signals to other players in the region.
Absolutely. And look, the AUKUS Pact is an important pact between Australia, the US and the UK. There are a lot of sensitivities around the capability that the US is sharing with its ally Australia. It's unlikely that we're going to see that sharing extended any more widely, at least until we've had proof of concept in place. So I think we've got a long way to go before we see a much more formalised kind of arrangement. But certainly cooperation is possible, and there are a lot of different forms of cooperation. So I think Japan will play very, very easily into that play.
Interesting. You often wonder what Australians actually think about this alliance. You've done some research on that. What did it tell you?
Absolutely, Beverly. We've been working on a project to listen to what Australians actually think about the alliance, and overwhelmingly the response that came from a wide range and very diverse range of ordinary Australians, men, women, younger people, very diverse groups, is that there is strong support for the alliance. But what was interesting for us was that when you dig a little bit deeper under that, I think Australians generally want to know more about the alliance. They want to know what's in it for them. And certainly we saw a degree, particularly from younger voices, of wanting to see the alliance actually broaden to deal with issues that are more relevant for younger Australians, like climate action, like gender equality. And I think we've actually seen some of that reflected in the AUSMIN statement that came out yesterday.
And how unusual is that? Because you don't often think of this particular meeting, this ongoing meeting, as you point out, to be broadened to those kind of social issues.
Absolutely. It's been very much framed, and quite rightly, in a fairly narrow kind of mutual defence cooperation lens. But, you know, the world is changing. The kinds of issues that we are facing are really changing. Those non-traditional threats, like climate change, like dealing with pandemics, like thinking about new technology, are very much on the radar. They're very much on the radar for younger Australians and younger Americans, as well as business communities. So I actually think it is important that we're having a much wider conversation about what the alliance might deliver beyond those traditional security initiatives, and what it might deliver that actually is really relevant to the issues that younger and a wider diversity of Australians are thinking about and are worried about.
Yeah, and gives them greater investment in the whole issue. Lovely to talk to you, Caitlin. Thanks so much.
You too, Beverly. Good night.